Welcome everyone to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion of The Personal Librarian. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of The Girlfriend and the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. For October, we did something a little unusual. The more than 35,000 members of the Girlfriend Book Club actually chose two books, not one, but two books to read in October. And one is The Personal Librarian. The other one is Falling. And the author of that book, TJ Newman, will be joining us tomorrow night at 7:30 for our discussion. But tonight, we're so pleased to welcome the author of The Personal Librarian, Victoria Christopher Murphy. Unfortunately, Marie Benedict cannot join us tonight, or she might join us in the middle. We don't know. She's had a family issue to deal with, but we're so pleased to welcome Victoria Christopher Murphy.
Hi.
Hey, welcome to the Girlfriend Book Club.
I'm glad to be here. I'm so glad to be here. And Marie sends her apology. She really wanted to be here, but
no, we're so thrilled to have you here. So also for those people that are watching, please post your questions in the comments section, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I possibly can at the end of this, like the last 10 minutes of this discussion. We only have 30 minutes, so it's going to be fast. So,
okay.
So The Personal Librarian is one of my favorite books of the year.
Oh, thank you.
And as I mentioned before, I love to read something that's so original about a person and a subject that I knew nothing about before. That is so rare today. You know, when you read a book, it's so unusual to actually read a book that you really don't know anything about the subject or the issue. It is, unreal. But when I read it, the first question that I had when I finished it was, when did Belle's secret come out? How did the world find out about Belle? I mean, when did that happen?
Well, the one thing, and this is going to be a little bit of a long answer to get to the point. The one thing she always knew when her family separated and she lived with her mother as white, that she could never be connected to her father. He was the first Black graduate from Harvard. He was an activist. In today's times, he'd be the head of Black Lives Matter movement, very out there. Any connection to him would have made her Belle Marion Greener, which was the name she was born with. And that's what eventually happened. About 20 years after she passed away, papers of his were discovered.
Papers of her father?
Of her father.
Okay.
Were discovered in Chicago, which is where he lived.
Right.
And I think they were going to demolish the building or something. And so somebody found these papers, gave them to a historian who said, oh my goodness, this is Richard T. Greener. We need his papers. Huh. But they were looking for Richard T. Greener, the first Black graduate from Harvard, the activist.
Right.
And inside his papers, other questions started coming up. He's talking about a wife. He's talking about 5 children. He's talking about all of these things that no one knew about. And then the connection was made.
So that was made about 20 years after Belle's death.
So in the 70s, we believe. And then it wasn't until 2007 that the definitive autobiography, not autobiography, the definitive biography, An Illuminated Life, was written about Belle's life.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, because I was just wondering how this came to light finally, because
she burned all of her papers.
Right, she did. Yeah.
She burned all of her papers. And so the only connection was made through her father.
So how did you and Marie, or one of you, how did you find out about this story?
So this was all Marie. And so this was really interesting. Marie writes historical fiction. I write contemporary fiction. But Marie writes historical fiction of what I like to say are these wonderful women whose lives and histories have been erased and they've been lost inside the folds of history. I love saying that because then she goes inside all this material and she finds them. And Marie just keeps a list of women that she'd like to teach us about through biographical novels. And so many years ago, she enjoyed visiting the Morgan Library. She was working in New York. She was an attorney before she became a full-time
Mhm.
writer.
Yeah.
And she would go there and visit and sit around. And she met a docent there one time who told her, J.P. Morgan did not build this library by himself. And the docent mentioned Belle DeCosta Green. At that time, the docent did not mention, and Marie did not know that Belle was Black.
Right.
And so Marie said, "Oh, this isn't really interesting." She said, she had a whole list of women she was going to write about. And so she always kept Belle in the back of her mind. But then when she started thinking about she wanted to write Belle and discovered that she was Black, Marie always felt that as a white fiction writer, she wasn't sure she could do Belle justice. So she happened to read my novel, Stand Your Ground. I think she read it in 2019. And even though it was a contemporary book, I was writing a novel about two points of view, a Black woman and a white woman.
Right.
And she reached out to her agent, who then contacted my agent, who then contacted me. And in the beginning, didn't want to have anything to do with it because at first I was like, what is my agent thinking? I mean, why is a white historical fiction author contacting a contemporary Black author? Like, so I thought maybe Marie was confused, like she had never seen my face.
Yeah.
And so when my agent said, Victoria, she knows you're Black, and you just read the treatment, it still took me 2 months to read the treatment because it was about the first page was about J.P. Morgan, and I wasn't interested in him.
Yeah.
And so finally, when my agent said, you're not that busy, can you read the 2 pages? I finally did. And then I couldn't wait to be part of the project. I just hoped I hadn't waited too long.
Yeah.
I have done collaborations before. Marie had not. So I knew we could do it. The moment we talked on the phone, we had a connection like we had been friends. But I can't
That's
explain
amazing.
it.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. Like something happened. We are so close now. Something happened last week. I was on a plane, and something happened while I was on a plane. And the first person I contacted, texted from the plane, was Marie. That's how close we are now. We're like sisters.
That is amazing. I'm just going to take a quick question because right off the bat, do you think J.P. Morgan had any idea that Belle was Black and overlooked it based on her talents?
Okay, in the beginning, I would bet everything, all the money that everybody has who's watching and who you and I talking, he did not know. A couple of reasons I am convinced he did not know in the beginning. One, she was working at Princeton,
Yeah.
where she was introduced, and Princeton was the only Ivy League that was still whites only. And so they didn't even employ Black people. They didn't have any Black students there. So she came to him as white. And the little things that we know about him, the comments he made about Jews and things, he would not have been very open to it. Now, I cannot say what happened afterwards because there was always rumors, though
Right.
the rumors were never that she was Black. The rumors were, what is she?
Yeah.
Is she
Is she from
Cuban?
Cuba? Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that was a real article we found.
Right.
Or they would say things about her dusky complexion, but there was never any rumors that I think she's Black.
Right.
And so, but even if he did discover it, I think he could have gone one of 2 ways. One, he could have said, she's so good, and if I say she's white, because he was the most powerful man in the country.
Right.
Or he would have been so upset and he would have destroyed her and her family.
Yeah.
So we don't know what happened after their relationship developed, but there's no way he would have hired her as a Black woman.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. So did anything surprise you as you were researching Belle? And how did you two research her together, I guess I should ask?
Well, the good thing was Marie had done a lot of the base foundation of research, and then we read the biography and illuminated life together, and it's like 800 pages, so it was a complete biography of Belle. And then we just, you don't know what you don't know until you start writing. So research continues as you write.
Right.
So suddenly, like if she's at the Vanderbilt's house, I'm like, okay, I need to find out what the house looked like. I need to see a floor plan. What would the wait staff have worn? What would she have worn? So you never know. So we did all that kind of thing as we were going along. That's how we discovered little comments about, is she Cuban? Is she tropical? What is she? Because through that research. So as we were each writing scenes, how we did it was each chapter, before we started, we talked out the chapter.
Oh.
Before we started. And then depending on what the chapter was about, one of us would write the foundation of the chapter, and then we would switch and give it to the other. Because one of the things that Marie and I discovered as we were writing was that we are the perfect match for each other. What I mean by that is Marie loves to write the first draft. She loves that. Writing a first draft for me is like getting my teeth pulled without any medication. And I hate it. But when Marie is finished with the first draft, she's like, it's over. I can go on to the next book. And I'm like, no, that's when I love to massage the book and make each sentence better. So we just played on each other's strengths so much.
Well, I was going to ask you how you worked together to create this book.
Yeah, that's what we discussed. And the thing I'm so proud of, Shelley, is that every word we wrote together. And then, so that's how we did the writing, and we would switch off, but we discussed it first. So Marie's words would find its way into chapters that I wrote. My words would find its way into chapters that Marie wrote. But then when we switched, then I went in and did what I did.
Right.
Marie would go in, and she used to have a magic brush. We used to call it her magic historical brush, because I am a contemporary writer.
Yes.
And I have written 30 novels. And my novels end up on Lifetime. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's really a lot of substance. So put it that way. And when we were writing these books, there were times in the dialogue when I wanted to say, "What's up, dude?" You know, and that didn't quite work in the early 20th century. And so Marie would just come back and brush it up. And our strengths, what you see in that book, is the strengths of Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray.
So if somebody's asking what parts of the book are fictional.
Okay, so that's really hard to explain. So the book is fact, and we filled in the fiction. So let me give you an example. In one of the first scenes, we know the fact is she had an interview with J.P. Morgan.
Right.
We know the date. Darn near almost know the time. And we know it was at the library. So we know she had an interview with him, and what day. We know she was hired.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know what went on in that interview.
Right.
And so what we did to fill in that part was, who was Belle? Who was she the day she met him? We know what happened with her mother and her father. We know what kind of things her mother was probably telling her. A lot of that came from my family background and things I could add to that.
That was a really interesting part of the book.
And then we filled in. So that's fiction, because we weren't there. We were not. So it's hard to say what percentage, but the book, I would say the book is built on facts. And then we filled in the fiction.
So I love the setting of the book, New York City in the early 20th century, and even London as well. So what did you love about writing about that setting, or what did you learn about that period in time? It was so interesting. And I really loved the parts where Belle was attending a Vanderbilt party, or going to these fancy soirees. It was,
and we like those things. We know the dates that she went to the parties. We know things like that. But we didn't know what she wore. We didn't know what the house looked like. We had to go in and do that. And those are the kinds of things that I adore doing. Yeah. That's what I love, putting the reader there. Yeah. So I'm a New York City girl. And so I was born and raised in New York. So it was wonderful for me to go back to the place I was born and raised, and go back 100 years and imagine my grandmother walking through the streets. So my grandmother, who would pass for convenience, not as a lifestyle.
Ah,
But if she went into the bank and no one ever said, go to the colored section, she
right.
would stay there because she got better treatment. So that's why I knew a lot of the conversations that would be going on, and things like that. So even though we had to fill it in with fiction, we tried to stay true to the characters, true to the time, what New York City was like,
Right.
even though it wasn't in the South. The Jim Crow tentacles had reached across the country. And so people were still segregated. There was still racism going on. They didn't have as many lynchings. They had a few, but we wanted to build the world, this wonderful world where Belle, I called her an uptown girl or a downtown girl, where she could be uptown with the Vanderbilts and then downtown in Greenwich Village
Right.
drinking a dark beer. I had never even heard of dark beer, a dark beer and smoking cigarettes. But all around her was horrible segregation
Right.
and racism.
So somebody else, I'm just taking questions because they're so good. Any descendants that you found in this process? Any like great nieces or nephews or anybody? Are there any descendants of Belle that you were in
Yeah,
contact?
we didn't. Well, we know that her two older sisters never had children. So
Oh,
was it the same for the same reason that Belle didn't? You don't know what your child is going to look like.
right.
And so how much you want to play into that. We couldn't find her brother, whether or not he had children. Her younger sister did have children. She had one son who was born right at the beginning of World War I, and then Teddy's husband went to war and died. And so Teddy was very depressed about that. It ended up that Belle and her mother raised that son, Bobby. We actually had it in a book and took it out because it just went off on a different tangent. And he died in World War II. But that same sister remarried. She had another child, a girl that she named Belle.
Oh,
And that that woman died in 2005.
ah,
But one of the things that I want people to know is that this is fiction. And so we don't go out and talk to the relatives because that would be a nonfiction book.
right.
And so I think sometimes it's difficult for people because this is a biographical novel.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it was interesting. We wanted to know more, but we did not talk to anybody because we were making up the story.
Right. So I know that Marie's not with us, but I know she was a lawyer and you
Yes.
were in corporate America working in financial services for many
Yes.
years. So how did you come to be a writer after such
Yeah, after all those years. Well, both Marie and I were both unhappy. Well, it wasn't, I can't say that I was unhappy because I spent 10 years in corporate America. I just always wanted to be a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer. I wrote my first masterpiece when I was 7. So
Really?
I know that, yeah. And you know how I know it was a masterpiece? It was called Betty and the Witch. And it was a masterpiece because I plagiarized all the masterpieces out there. It was about a little girl in a red uniform that she wore to school. It had a hood. She had 3 bears for brothers, 3 pigs for sisters, and the next door neighbors were 7 little people. And so I wrote that, gave it to my parents, gave it to my teacher. My teacher loved it. And the entire 2nd grade performed it as a play.
Oh,
And that
wow.
teacher validated my gift. I didn't know that's what she was doing at the time. So I've always wanted to be a writer, but as I was growing up, I didn't know any writers. And so I ended up going into corporate America, but I never, ever, ever lost the dream to write. I knew one day, I didn't know how I was going to get here, but I knew that I would.
No, it's just great that both of you had careers in a different area and you came to be great writers. It's incredible, actually. So
Yeah.
so I was going to ask, so does writing in the first person as you did in this book. Does that make it easier to tell the story, or is that more difficult to do?
That makes it easier for me. Like I've written 30 other books, and my first 10 were in third person, and I couldn't imagine ever writing in first person. But then I wrote 4 young adult books, and since I'm obviously not a young adult, I needed to figure out a way to become those characters. And so I decided to try to write in third person. I mean, in first person, and that really helped me because I was like, oh my gosh, writing in first person, I become the characters. I'm not removed anymore. I'm the person. And so in this case, we became Belle. I mean, there were times I remember Marie used to always say this, that she could feel Belle like standing in the corner, tapping her foot, saying, "You guys need to get this book done," you know. And one day I called Marie and said, the same thing just happened to me. Belle said we need to do this. So it made it easier.
That's great. I know a lot of your books and Marie's books have been picked up for, TV series, et cetera, et cetera. What's happening with this book? Is anything going on?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
That's all I can say is stay tuned.
I was going to ask you who you could see playing Belle in the TV series or movie version of this book.
Yeah, that is always so hard for me because even with my books that have become movies, I've never even thought about who, because when I'm writing them, I'm not picturing an actor.
Right.
I'm picturing the person. So now I'm so tied to this person. It's very hard for me to try to guess or to pick someone to play. It would have to be someone who could pass because we want to be real to that story. And then she would have to be able to play the range of the young Belle. And we started with Belle at about the age of 25, 26, because she was lying about her age. So they were doing that even back then.
Yeah.
And we continue to carry her forward into her late 30s. So someone who could play that range.
So somebody just mentioned Alicia Keys as the perfect person. So
yeah, she would be good. See, I would have never thought about that.
Yeah. So what do you hope readers will take away from this book?
The best thing that happened, besides my friendship with Marie developed after we had finished the first draft at the end of 2019. I was like, wow, I got a good girlfriend for life. This is going to be really good. And then we got our edits back in March of 2020, right in the beginning of the pandemic. So we were both like stuck at home, forced to work because both of us travel a lot. And we could only travel from our living room to our bedroom to our office now. And then we were still, because the editing process, we were working pretty much from March to like August. And so it was during the summer of 2020 and all of the racial unrest that was going on at the time. And Marie and I were already writing a book about race.
Mm-hmm.
And now we saw it unfolding around us. And so it became a situation where every day a Black woman and a white woman had to talk about race and real serious conversations. Like I was able to say to Marie, when people say, why did Genevieve have them pass? What was she, why? Did she just want to be white? No. She wanted to make sure that her children never ended up on the wrong side of a cop's knee. That's what she was trying. And then, so the picture was like just coming to life, where I can imagine Genevieve coming 100 years forward and saying, see, I told you, because she had been in a civil rights fight with her husband.
Right.
So I am hoping that people get the experience that Marie and I had. I'm hoping that I wish Black book clubs and white book clubs who didn't know each other, because Marie and I didn't know each other. People find that fascinating that we had never met.
I know. I find that fascinating.
And she was audacious enough to reach out to someone that she'd never met and thought that this would work. And it did. And if people could just come together, because we see things through such different eyes. And it's a lot of people will say, wow, that's so good that Marie listened to you, Victoria. But I listened to Marie as well. It was
Yeah.
just as important for me to understand what she saw or
Right.
didn't see or had never seen.
Right.
And and because of that, we're sisters
Yeah.
now.
So I have to ask before, because we're running out of time, what are you guys working on next? I know you're doing something together.
Yes, we're working on our next book is going right now. It's tentatively called The First Ladies, and it is the friendship between Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune.
Oh.
And Mary McLeod Bethune was the very first Black person, the Black cabinet, to serve on in a presidential cabinet, and was because of the friendship between those two. And they took a lot of heat from other people. And Marie and I kind of see a little bit of us in those two women.
So when will we see that book?
That will be out in 2023. We're working on that right now.
And I have to ask, because other people are asking, so what authors inspire you, or what book have you loved that you read recently?
Oh my goodness, and I read a lot. So I read The Yellow Wife this year by Shadiqua Johnson, which was amazing.
Yeah.
I finished Island Queen, which was just as amazing. I just finished yesterday We Are Not Like Them. The
Oh, I
new
haven't
Good
read that
Morning.
one.
Yeah, it's the new Good Morning America book club pick. And it's very similar to a book, my book, Stand Your Ground. My book, Stand Your Ground, was about a young Black man who gets unarmed, shoot by a white man. And it's told from the perspective of a Black mother and the white wife of the shooter. And We Are Not Like Them is a young Black man that gets shot by a unarmed Black man who gets shot by a white cop. And it's told from the perspective of two best friends, one Black, one white, but the white one is the wife of the cop. And so it is such a fascinating thing for me to have written that book and then to read this book, because the thing that's so sad is I wrote my book 5 years ago and we still have to write these books and still say the same thing. So I really did enjoy that. I just finished that yesterday. But those are the three that stand out in my mind this year.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying The Yellow Wife is their favorite book of the year. So
Yellow Wife was phenomenal.
Yeah. So can I just ask, when you're not reading or writing, so the girlfriend's all about female friendship. What do you like to do for fun when you're with your girlfriends?
Oh, yeah. And, it's so funny because I just left Houston, where one of my very best friends is getting married again. And I just like hanging out with my friend. Now, see, we love talking about books. Anybody who is one of my friends, we love talking about books. We love going to great restaurants. All of us do love walking and exercising and getting out and doing things together and taking kickboxing classes. All the things to just keep us young, and doing things to make our adult children just cringe. That's my goal in life.
So a lot of people are asking, they want to read something else that you've written that's been turned into a movie or series. So what would you recommend somebody that's a big fan of yours to read next?
Okay, so if this one hasn't been turned into a movie, but Stand Your Ground was the novel that I won not only in the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literature, but it was voted as a Library Journal Best Book of the Year in 2015. So that's my favorite, next to The Personal Librarian.
Okay.
The books that have been turned into Lifetime movies. I'm writing the so now you're gonna have to come back to my contemporary side. I'm writing the 7 Deadly Sins series.
Right.
And so I wrote Lust and Envy, and those two were already turned into Lifetime movies. And I wrote Greed and Wrath, and we start filming next month.
Wow. Okay. But Stand Your Ground is one you would
Stand Your Ground is the one I really recommend. It's not a movie.
Okay.
But if you want ones with movies, that's the 7 Deadly Sins.
Yeah. So I just have to ask, I mean, did you ever expect this book to become the hit that it has become?
That's the question that I ask Marie all the time. Because, this started in her head. And I wasn't sure. I thought that people would be fascinated to see a Black author and a white author write together.
Right.
And I love that it wasn't just a gimmick. You know what I mean? That I don't think Belle's complete story could have been told without, these were two halves that needed to make her whole. And so I thought that people would find it interesting, but Good Morning America book club?
I know.
Are you kidding me? I never thought about that. When they called us in January and we had to keep it secret for 6 months, and I told none of my girlfriends, like
Oh
my best one, it was a week before it was coming out, and I was on the phone with my agent and with the publisher, and I was like, if I don't tell my best friend, if she finds out with everybody else,
She's gonna
and
be
they're like,
mad.
we got 1 week left, you can tell her, but tell her she can't tell anybody. We just had when they called and said we're gonna be, I don't even think, Shelley, I understood what that meant. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's just
And then
amazing.
it's just, I am so happy and honored and grateful that this book has been received. I wasn't sure if my readers were going to enjoy it. And they're like, so can you write another historical fiction? Because, like, we really like you here.
Well, everyone loves it. If you haven't read it, get The Personal Librarian. It's amazing. Our time is up, unfortunately. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
Marie, but it was so great just chatting with you. And just to tell all the book club members, please stay on the book club page because I'm posting about 6 conversation starters so you guys can talk about the book amongst yourselves. I know everybody loved it. Tomorrow night, the author of Falling is joining me at 7:30 p.m., just like tonight. So thank you so much, Victoria. We can't wait to see what you and Marie do next. And
thank you. And thank you for supporting me and all the readers who voted for this book. Oh my gosh. Grateful is not even a big enough word.
No, it's amazing. I mean, there are, like I said, there's over 35,000 members and they voted for this book. So they love this book. So I'm so thrilled to talk to you tonight. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Stay on the book club page. And thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. Bye-bye.